Next, on this special edition of Currents News, through wind, rain, heavy snow, Catholic Charities is braving the extreme conditions all week long.
We really had to take on that role of being sometimes the only person that they see, delivering that hot meal, and their point person to the outside world.
Governor Andrew Cuomo still in the hot seat over nursing home deaths. Even the White House could soon be getting involved.
I'm hopeful that something positive will come out of these different legislations.
Their dreams could become a reality. The Biden administration is discussing a path to citizenship for DACA recipients. Plus, Christmas in February. The NYPD and the Catholic Church coming together to bring cheer to families struggling during the pandemic. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. We've had all kinds of weather this week, from a huge snowstorm to whipping winds and then rain. But just like the mailman, nothing will stop Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens from delivering food to homebound seniors during this pandemic. Currents News' Jessica Easthope went with them on a few deliveries in Bayside.
Today's not one of our better days due to the weather.
Bob Garnett has braved the pandemic. So a little or a lot of snow is an obstacle he's willing to overcome. For the last 14 years, Bob's been driving around Queens, delivering food to homebound seniors for Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens Home Delivered Meals program. But none of those years were anything like this.
It's been a struggle for them. Of course, they can't get out, and especially on a day like today, they really appreciate the meals.
9,000 meals a month used to be average, but when the pandemic hit, that number shot up. In December, Catholic Charities delivered more than 13,000 meals to seniors in Northeast Queens. And over the course of the pandemic, it's taken on more than 200 new clients.
Have a good day, okay?
Some haven't left their homes in nearly a year, especially not on days like this.
We really had to take on that role of being sometimes the only person that they see, delivering that hot meal, and their point person to the outside world.
I have to call the client first.
Over the years, Bob has gotten to know his clients.
I'm okay. Your food is downstairs.
And they've gotten to know him.
He wants me to leave it inside the door.
He knows what they like and don't like.
But this house gets kosher.
Every senior signed up for the program gets a meal, juice, bread, and milk, the basics. But the pandemic has made doing this job anything but simple.
We put it on the doorknob, we knock, we wait for the client to come out. So it's not the same as before, where we could just go in and leave it on that client's table.
But the distance doesn't break the bond.
And I'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Bob's connection to the seniors on his route sometimes comes with loss.
I've known these people for a number of years. You try not to let it weigh you down, but they always pop back into your head. As soon as you pass their house, they're not there anymore.
The feeling of loss might always be there, but so will the reward of making a difference, long after the snow melts. In Bayside, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Thousands of our elderly family members and friends in nursing homes have died of COVID-19 over the past year. It was the subject of a New York State Attorney General report, which said the state severely undercounted the number of nursing home deaths. Currents News' Emily Druby has more on what's next for Governor Andrew Cuomo.
New Yorkers demanding answers and action after the state's attorney general shows nursing home deaths were much higher than originally detailed by the state.
Someone has to be held responsible, and we've got to get to the bottom of this.
New York City Councilman Eric Ulrich has been very vocal in sounding the alarm from the beginning. After losing several friends in nursing homes and hearing from his constituents, he realized the numbers weren't adding up. Now his suspicions have seemingly been confirmed.
Numerous mistakes made and bad policy decisions that were made that directly resulted in the deaths of thousands of New Yorkers who didn't have to die. And then the governor tried to cover that up.
Here's what happened. Back in the summer, there was talk that the number of nursing home deaths attributed to COVID-19 could be much higher than the state was reporting. That's because nursing home residents who died in hospitals were not being counted. Governor Cuomo dodged these critics for months, but last week, State Attorney General Letitia James, who is a Democrat, released a scathing report after a long investigation that began with multiple several complaints of COVID-related neglect. That forced health department officials to release their closely held data, contributing thousands of new deaths to nursing home totals, about 45% higher than the original number. Many angry over a lack of transparency. The report also bringing up a highly criticized early pandemic decision by Cuomo, forcing nursing homes to accept COVID-positive patients. Now, the governor denied any undercount, taking issues with the AG's findings, his response fueling the fire.
Whether a person died in a hospital or died in a nursing home, the people died.
His health commissioner, Howard Zucker, reminding people the number of deaths hasn't changed. It's where they happened.
Reporting the number of deaths is always the hardest number to report out there, and we wanted to be sure that those numbers were accurate.
Now attention has been turned towards next steps.
The fact that the governor engaged in this cover-up, people should be outraged. There needs to be a full-fledged investigation. And somebody has to be held responsible for this.
The White House said they'll decide if a Department of Justice investigation on the matter will take place. There have been calls for Cuomo's health commissioner to resign, while Attorney General James continues to investigate at least 20 nursing homes of particular concern. Emily Druby, Currents News.
New York lawmakers are outraged over the numbers and Governor Cuomo's response. Currents News spoke with one of them, Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, who represents Brooklyn and Staten Island. She has been demanding the governor's health commissioner resign. So we asked her, what about the governor?
We certainly need more information of what the governor knew. The governor is the one that indeed did sign that executive order, which many of us disagree with and has led to thousands of deaths. And so certainly I think that the governor needs to take accountability. He needs to answer the questions that the public has.
The New York State Senate is preparing to pass 10 bills which will bolster accountability and oversight of nursing homes. Over in Washington, President Joe Biden is continuing to make changes to the country's immigration policies, signing 3 executive orders this week alone. The first establishes a task force to reunite families who were separated at the southern border as they tried to enter the U.S. Another, he says, will address the root causes of migration to the U.S.-Mexico border by providing support to Central America to stem the flow of migrants. The last is a full review of the Trump administration's policies across the board, including the border wall and a policy that required non-Mexican asylum seekers to stay in Mexico until their scheduled court dates, and it reestablishes a task force to streamline the naturalization process. The moves are making many immigrants feel more secure, and they are raising hopes at the U.S. border. Jessica Easthope has the story.
Ilsa Mendez came to Laredo, Texas with her parents at the age of 2. She's now 33. Everyone in her family, including her 4 children, are now U.S. citizens, except her. Mendez is one of the hundreds of thousands of people known as Dreamers. President Biden is proposing a pathway to citizenship for these immigrants who have been able to live in the U.S. because of the program known as DACA.
We've lived 4 years of Trump stringing us along with that fear and anxiety. So I'm hopeful that something positive will come out of these different legislations or these executive actions that Biden has brought.
On other issues, Biden will face legal challenges. The president issued a 100-day pause on deportations, but a federal judge has temporarily blocked that move. And there are still about 28,000 migrants sitting in Mexican border towns, waiting to seek asylum through the controversial Remain in Mexico policy. Advocates have pushed for these migrants to be allowed into the country while their cases are handled in immigration courts.
I will accomplish what I said I would do. A much more humane policy based on family unification.
Former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement Ronald Vitello warns that Biden's immigration policies could create another surge of migrants at the southern border.
My warning would be learn from the history that we already have. When you roll back those elements of what's in place now, then you're gonna encourage people.
The Biden administration is also encouraging all people, regardless of immigration status, to get the COVID-19 vaccine. It says federal immigration agencies will not be conducting enforcement operations at or near vaccine distribution sites or clinics. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
U.S. bishops are applauding Biden's efforts to strengthen DACA and are prepared to work with the president and Congress on immigrants' rights. The bishops strongly believe that dreamers have been enriching our country for years and they deserve a pathway to citizenship. They are calling the issue an urgent matter of human life and dignity. But are Biden's new orders enough? What one expert has to say next on Currents News.
It's a lot of flowery language, but there's not a lot of punch to it.
Immigration lawyer Steve Maggi joins us with a look at the president's policy changes. Showing faith through creation, the architect of a world-famous basilica is now on the road to sainthood. And it's still Christmas for some lucky kids. New York's finest teaming up with one local parish in Astoria to help spread some joy. More now on those White House plans when it comes to immigration. I spoke with immigration attorney Steve Maggi about the president's plans to streamline the naturalization process and what it means for the Diocese of Immigrants.
Well, it's good news because as part of that same executive order, there's also a mention of the public charge rule, and there's a note that's going to be taken away, and that's what really complicated the naturalization process. Not only are there a lot of people applying, but they changed the form over a year ago and added all these questions about public benefits, and that scared a lot of people into not applying because they may have accepted some sort of federal or state benefit at some point along the way when they were residents, and that scared people away. So in the same executive order, he's saying we're going to streamline this. That means to me that they're going to make it shorter, they're going to remove the public charge rule from it, and really it's just going to be about whether you've committed crimes or done something that makes you ineligible, and if you haven't and you've paid your taxes, you should be able to apply and receive your citizenship. So it's very good news.
All right, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is praising Biden, saying in a statement, "We welcome these executive orders on migration, which will help to ensure that immigrants and refugees are treated humanely and in accordance with their God-given dignity." Biden wants to help Central America stem the flow of migrants to the U.S.-Mexico border, provide other ways to migrate. But will these policy changes increase the number of migrants at the southern border?
I think that they might. The question is, can you do it in a systematic way that protects each individual as they're going through the process? Right now, because of what's called migrant protection protocols that were instituted by President Trump, you have 50,000 or more people at the borders, at different border entry crossings, that are waiting in these camps that are put in very difficult, precarious situations while they wait because they're not allowed to present their asylum applications. And so that has to change. We have to revert back to at least where it was before, where if you could prove what's called well-founded fear, you have credible fear enough to warrant an actual hearing in front of a judge, then you would be paroled or admitted into the U.S. and allowed eventually to present your case.
All right, some critics say many of the executive orders are just calling for existing policies to be reviewed without any real changes that will make an immediate impact. Do you think Biden needs to do more?
It's really a lot of rhetoric right now. It sounds great on paper. They talk about being humane. They talk about clarifying things, about revisiting committees and task forces. But there's not really any plan that's solid, and there's no clarity in terms of when this will actually put into motion and what could happen. And what that makes me think is that really until there is comprehensive immigration reform, there's not going to be a whole lot of change. And that's a little discouraging. So I am disappointed so far because we knew as soon as President Biden was elected and they announced it and made it official, there have been more than 2.5 months since then. We would have figured that the executive orders would really have a lot more meat to them and we would see how it's actually going to be implemented. And we don't see that right now. It's a lot of flowery language, but there's not a lot of punch to it.
Again, that was immigration lawyer Steve Maggi. Over at the Vatican, Pope Francis, a vocal supporter of migrants, is now fully inoculated against COVID-19. The pontiff received his second dose of the vaccine on Wednesday. Francis was one of the first to get the shot last month. It should bring back some normalcy to the Pope's routine.
È un po' strana questa preghiera dell'Angelus di oggi, col Papa ingabbiato nella biblioteca.
Speaking of a return to normalcy, this was back in March, but now the Pope is returning to the most famous window in Rome. The pontiff will pray the Angelus this Sunday from the window of the Apostolic Palace. The Holy Father had to go virtual for a second time in December due to rising COVID numbers in Italy. But again, pilgrims will now be able to see the Pope in person every Sunday in limited numbers to guarantee social distancing. As the Pope returns to his window at the Apostolic Palace, we turn to the stunning basilica in Barcelona that has been under construction for nearly 140 years. Did you know the late architect who designed the Sagrada Familia could become a saint? He was a world-famous architect and a devout Catholic. Antoni Gaudi's faith clearly on display in the details of his most important work, the design of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona.
The principal dogmas of the Catholic doctrine are represented on the facades of the Sagrada Familia.
Father Gabriel Cordoba is also a Spanish architect and wrote a book on the theology behind Gaudi's work. Like medieval cathedrals, authentic Bibles in stone, Gaudi conceived the Sagrada Familia as a large catechesis. He took the altarpieces that are usually found inside the church and moved them outside where everybody could see the truths of the Christian faith. Gaudi wanted to reflect the early Christian church, but with the progress and advances of the time.
Pope Benedict XVI said that Gaudi's ability to bring out the altarpieces, his 3 facades, and his 18 towers made an ecclesiology. There, the church is proclaimed, and he reveals the glory of God through beauty.
Father Cordoba says many elements have been gathered to show that the brilliant architect was a saint. He was a mystic and proclaimed God's glory through his works and his everyday life.
Gaudi was a person with a great intellectual capacity. He was a cultured and very knowledgeable person, but he was also a deeply religious and spiritual person. The expression of faith through the liturgy was fundamental for him. He was a person of daily communion. Of course, he was also a defender of the faith during those turbulent times at the end of the 19th century.
Gaudi not only sought God through architecture and his way of working, he saw God through the creation and all its people. Gabriel explains that Gaudi also inspired faith in others and continuously showed acts of solidarity to his workers, peers, and Barcelona's citizens.
I felt that it would be important to present a thesis that covers the entire building of the Basilica of the Sagrada Familia. I particularly wanted to convey that Gaudi, being a deeply religious person, was able to capture the beauty of what he lived and what he felt from God. All this inspiration came directly to him from God.
Antoni Gaudi died in 1926 at the age of 74 while still working on the construction of the basilica. The association that promotes the cause for his beatification has been working with the Vatican in order to declare him blessed. But before that can happen, they need the Pope to first declare him venerable and prove a miracle performed through his intercession. Still to come on this special edition of Currents News, a touching story as the MTA memorializes the workers who've died during this pandemic. And spreading Christmas cheer in the new year, New York's finest teaming up with a local parish to bring toys to some lucky kids. Even though you may have not taken the bus or subway recently, MTA employees have been there on the job throughout the pandemic, and many of them lost their lives to COVID. Now the agency is remembering them with a moving tribute. Currents News' Emily Druby filed this report from Grand Central Station.
The man on that middle screen is Matthew's father. Taken from him 10 months ago, a victim of COVID-19.
I feel like a flood of emotions and sadness.
One of 136 MTA employees lost to the virus, memorialized in this 8-minute video. Matthew seeing it in person for the first time. For many, the MTA is just a part of their commute. But for Matthew's father, Thunkachin Matai, it was much more.
He got this job right when his son was born, so God gave him 2 good things at the same time.
20 years at this job, a cleaner at a station in Queens when he passed.
My dad was always very grateful for this job, and this memorial it's like the MTA is also grateful for him.
Now Matthews is grateful for his Catholic faith, this memorial, and for family moments like the one depicted in this photo.
At heart, he was a family man, so that's why we picked that photo.
The video is called Travels Far. So many faces lost to the pandemic, heroes, transit workers who risked everything to keep the city running.
It was so important to us to honor these frontline workers who came in when, other people were able to stay home, and they came in to make sure that we could get police officers to where they needed to be, healthcare workers where they needed to be.
And their fellow employees still do that every single day. In mid-January, just days after the MTA's 70,000 employees became eligible to get vaccinated, shots were already going into transit workers' arms. Both agency and union top officials urging their employees to get vaccinated. The MTA is also working on its own, not yet released vaccination plan. As for these 136 families, the MTA providing them with liaisons, point people to help with anything from grief counseling to collecting life insurance, reminding them they have a strong community, just like the video.
Seeing this video helped me know that I'm not alone.
Just like family, the MTA proving their lines run deep. In Grand Central Terminal, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Another city agency, the police department, is proving again why they're called New York's finest. Some officers joined forces with a Queens church during these very tough times to spread some Christmas cheer in the new year. Emily Druby was at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Astoria for this heartwarming story.
Thank you. You're welcome. The Christmas cheer continues here in Astoria as Ivan and his little brother Elias pick out free toys.
When I tell them that, do you want to go get some toys? They're excited about it.
Choices galore brought to Our Lady of Mount Carmel's food pantry by the NYPD. Cindy Paulino helped make it happen.
The smiles on their faces, what really, means a lot.
Thanks to a big donor, her precinct collected an unprecedented number of toys in December. Even after multiple distributions, they still had plenty left. So they teamed up with this church's pastor.
These are families that don't have a lot, really. It was such a happy, sort of a surprise Christmas for them.
Distributing the toys during the church's new weekly food pantry, which has an impressive origin story itself. For over 30 years, they've run the popular pantry at their other church, St. Margaret Mary, also in Astoria. When the pandemic created an even greater need, the very active Hispanic community at Our Lady of Mount Carmel opened this second pantry, finding and collecting the food themselves, all volunteers helping about an extra 100 families a week.
Just seeing them smile makes you feel happy because some people didn't have Christmas, and because of the situation, some people don't even have jobs to even buy food, let alone presents.
The toys adding a bit of joy after a year plagued by job loss, poverty, and school closures, difficult for any child. It's also a way to build a relationship between the youngest and the finest in the neighborhood.
I think it helps them to see us that we're more human than they probably think behind the uniform and all that. And it helps them to not be afraid to talk to us and to, like I said, build a relationship.
The toy drive at Our Lady of Mount Carmel has been going on for 3 weeks. They plan to continue until all the toys are gone. In Astoria, Queens, Emily Druby, Currents News.
And that wraps up this special edition of Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.